Oh, I see, yes. So, guys, before I start, first of all, let me just tell you, just looking around the room, I've come from next door, where I just did a session. I just want to say that it's a much better class of people here than over there. Okay, just generally, I mean, it's an observation that I've made. It's a better, more classy group here. Please have pencils and paper ready because we're going to do some active thinking together at the end. But I think it's worth briefly just introducing ourselves. So, Not Everyday Life is an initiative. It's an org, a .org that has recently been set up. But we both have other lives. There's 6 of us in total heading this thing up. And I work for a consulting group called EOM, which is a Mars company consulting group, most of the time. And
I am a semiotician. It's probably safe to say I hit the jackpot in qualitative research because I specialize on the topics of food and alcohol. And as an atonement, I also teach at university. Together we founded Not Everyday Life.
Absolutely. So let me just start at the beginning. The beginning came with the first lockdown, which was a bit of a shock. I think things came on at such a speed that by the time we realized we couldn't leave our houses, clients had cancelled or postponed projects. People were put into furlough. We didn't know where we were, okay? So I had this idea in my head that there's actually a lot of interesting questions to explore. I remember one of the emails we received from Mars was, no more projects unless they're COVID related. Right? So don't do anything else unless it's to do with COVID. And so that meant, 80%, 90% of our projects stopped. Now, in this instant, I had this idea that, okay, I'm not going to be able to pay people to do research, but what I can do is sort of strike a deal. Here's a question, and the question was, which behaviors and attitudes are going to stick in a post-pandemic world? Go and interview someone. Okay, your choice. Here is a template to fill in when you interview them. And it was kind of like a bit of a discussion guide, but it's actually much more open than that. And send me the template. I will drop it into a pool. I will do one and drop my template into that pool. You have 2. If a third person does it, we'll have 3 we can access. And you can do what you want with it. You can monetize it. You can turn it into your own research project. It's like a crowdsourced project. And as Massimo said, we had around 500 people. We had about 2,000 people who joined from 40 countries. And these included participants, researchers, designers, people who wanted to help in some way, but they weren't good at interviewing, they weren't interested in interviewing, including people from, I'll let Catherine explain all of that, but we had people from across the board. And we ended up with a vast number of interviews and a vast number of content. So,
so what happened next? What happened next was that we found so many people who wanted to work with us and who wanted to be part of this on both sides. We had people writing to us saying, I want to do an interview, tell me what to do, tell me where to send my transcript. Then we had people who contacted us and said, I heard about this and I want to be interviewed. Find me somebody to interview me. So in the end, we had 500 interviews where everyone who did 1 interview or 10 interviews, it didn't matter, have access to everyone else's interviews. So we had a vast data pool. We had a vast number of people working for us. At one point, we had interns from universities because universities found that they couldn't send their students anywhere to do something. So they were writing to us and saying, can our course participate? Can we send you some people? So we had interns working for us. We had people managing all of that. We had
You gave them certification.
yeah, we did give them certification for that. They had a great experience. We collaborated online. It was fully online. We worked across the globe and across time zones. Somebody was always awake. I woke up. Somebody just finished their work. I logged off in the evening and asked somebody else to take over. It was really a very exciting time and a very exciting project. So essentially, it left us with a virtual company. We had a community of 700 people who did interviewing, who did sense-making. We had sense-making workshops over Zoom, where we had to find out how to work this out across time zones so that we had multiple sense-making workshops. It was the outcome was a 140 slide deck with our results. So you can still access it on the website, or you can write to us and we'll send it to you. It wasn't always easy, though. Like every kind of company that grows and grows quickly, we had our challenges as well. We had varying levels of experience because we didn't distinguish. We invited everyone. We didn't even ask, what is your credentials? We met on a completely level playing field. It didn't matter in your real life whether you were CEO, research director, student, intern. We didn't even ask the question. We, of course, also didn't get along all the time with all the people. We had our politics, we had our struggles, we had big egos, small egos. We had cultural differences, personal differences. We had misunderstandings. We had to work out everything while we were doing it. So we had to work out, for example, how do we communicate with each other when we come from different cultures and we don't even know exactly the cultural background of the other person. But our achievement, as I said, 140 slide deck of output about behaviors that would stick after the pandemic from 40 countries, all in English. We didn't have any real costs involved in producing this. So I think there's a lot of research out there on what will stick after the pandemic, but I think it's safe to say we were the most cost effective with a zero investment into that. Everyone who wanted to could take the output and monetize it, because that was the deal. You give your time, you give your expertise, you can do with the results whatever you want. And a lot of people found that very, very interesting. And it worked. So it worked. Now we're here. The pandemic is not yet over. But there's other topics as well that are worth researching. And we want to take this to the next level because we think we found something that is fascinating to a lot of people, that entices a lot of people, and that comes maybe at the right time for many people. And together with you, we would now like to explore how to go on from here.
Thanks, Katrin. So exactly. So the question now, the question at the end of that first NEL, we call it Not Everyday Life 1.0, was do we want to do something else? And I think we all agreed we do, because it was so incredibly powerful and successful. And how do we want to do it? Well, we don't want to put out another brief. We could do, but we don't want to keep stipulating and taking control of what's going on. So let's turn it in. I was quite inspired by, we were all quite inspired by Kickstarter, the Kickstarter approach. Let's ask anyone, any organization. So I also want to add that with NEL 1.0, we had a lot of client-side people. We had whole departments from companies joining us. They used their personal emails, but I knew who they were. And The question now is, let's turn it round to everyone else and say, you propose a project. We'll post it. We'll put it up there. If we get enough traction, if we get enough people wanting to take part in it, we'll press the button on it and we'll send it live. But there are some rules. And the rules are that it has to be for the common good. So these aren't kind of commercial projects about profitability of organizations. These are for the common good. And the data can't be confidential. Don't do anything that you're not happy to share, because one of the incentives for taking part is that people will have access to the data in whatever way they want to. So what I'd like to turn into a little chat with you, a conversation with you at the end is, and these are questions that we're kind of grappling with to a greater or lesser degree. We've kind of sorted some of them out. We haven't sorted other ones out, but I'm going to put them all out to you anyway. The first one is, what are the ground rules for the projects that we take on? What kind of parameters should we have in place? What should we not do? And what should we do? This is still a big question for us. We have many definitions of common good. What does common good mean? So one of the topics that we are exploring with one client at the moment is trust. And this is this is such a huge subject. We're trying to narrow it down, and we're not doing a good job of narrowing it down. But another thing that we're looking at is the tech pipeline issue, which is white, successful males writing the AI and algorithms that determine whether us colored people get a bank account or get, this or that. And this is a huge problem. Massive, massive problem. And there's a few other ones as well. And then, how do we do projects that don't take away from other agencies? Because what we don't want to end up doing is stepping on anyone else's feet. I don't want to, Ipsos or anyone else, smaller agency, coming over and saying, we could have done that project, and you're doing it for free. Almost. For next to nothing. This is a commercial project we could have been working on. We don't want to get into that. We want to make sure we do projects that only certain types of people would be interested in doing and getting behind. And finally, and this is something that we're still grappling with, is the elevator pitch. What is our elevator pitch? What is the essence of what we're doing? Don't tell me, well, you go and find out yourself. Why are you asking us to do it? I'm trying to turn this into an interactive conversation, a collaboration. So there's four topics here that Katrin has captured. So what are the ground rules for our types of projects? What should they be? What do we mean by common good? What don't we mean by common good? And then, how do we make sure that the sorts of topics that we take on, and this applies to the ground rules, don't upset other agencies and other people? And then, least bottom of the list really to think about is the elevator pitch, which will probably be a kind of percolate from the rest of it. So, does anybody want to hazard a thought, an idea? Good. Are you going to? Thank you.
Okay, I've got lots of thoughts, and I don't know how constructive they're going to be, nor how organised, because you've put up quite a lot of questions there. But I think this is really important. It's something in our company we talk about a lot. We sometimes take on quite small projects that we do for free just because we want to. But I think there's quite a lot of challenges around doing this kind of work, especially when you're trying to do it alongside the paid work. So one thought I would have that we've kind of encountered in stuff that we've done is how you can keep projects quite contained. You don't have the benefit of that client brief that's holding you to an objective at the end of the day. So you need to be quite rigorous and disciplined. Typically the types of questions we work on when we do this kind of work are like massive questions, kind of world-breaking questions. So you have to kind of find a way to kind of strip it back to the basics and give yourself an almost artificial brief and give yourself that artificial deadline and the pressure of a client if a client were there. So I think there's some sort of good basic bread and butter project management stuff that really helps here. And the other thing that again, in stuff that we've dabbled with, where we've talked about this sort of dichotomy between free work versus kind of pissing everybody else off because it's stuff they could be getting paid to do, is trying to do a piece that then becomes a foundation for other people to kind of fly off. So, you know, can you explore what good means today? Like, what are the things that what does doing good and being good mean to people today? That's a foundational piece of research that allows you to identify some pressing questions that then other people can go and partner with and dig deeper into in individual projects that may well be paid or semi-paid with kind of live client briefs and kind of category impact or whatever it might be. That was sort of one, and I had one other kind of thought and I've lost it again now. On the elevator pitch, I don't know about everybody else, but I sit in conferences like this and I have moments of thinking, oh God, I don't know, do I give a shit about selling more packets of toothpaste or whatever it is? And I can't believe I'm the only person who thinks that stuff. And this stuff is great because it makes you feel better. And I'm interested in how people behave in human psychology, which can be applied to these big, meaningful questions as well as selling more packets of toothpaste, and that's fine too. So I think this kind of work makes us feel more meaningful in our lives, and that's part of the elevator pitch, and I'll shut up now.
Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, one of the things that, thank you so much for that, that's fantastic. One of the things that I keep hearing from within the group is it's time to give back. So I've spent 30 years trying to help people make more money at whatever it is that they've asked me to work on, and it's really time to give something back. So I think that's an important essence of all of this. Yes.
Yes, I'm so happy I'm sitting. Oh, hello.
Sorry.
That we met yesterday very shortly. So some, as my kids call it, tips and tops. So when you mentioned it's free, keep in mind it's never free because time is also cost. So I think when you pitch it, it's never for free, right? So, and sometimes time is even more precious. That's why we pay agencies so it doesn't cost us time. So it really is the balance on what you mean with cost, I think. And then I had something on the 40 slides. I do understand that it's that shows how much depth there is. But from a client side, I prefer have one slide with super tangible insights and one double click behind it, because that is what I'm going to use. I'm not going to walk through 140 slides. So for me, that's not a sales pitch. It's actually showing, oh my gosh, 140 slides. How am I ever going to go through that in the short amount of time I have? Then my concern, which I hope you can solve, is if people are calling you, can I be interviewed? How do I know if they are the relevant people for me to get the right insights from, which I'm secured about if I work together with an agency. So that's more on the quality of we had, what was it? Garbage in, something else out. It was not the garbage out.
A big challenge. I mean, it's quality controlling is
exactly.
We haven't turned up.
Yeah. So, and then what my concern would be is how quickly is the turnaround? Because if you have to find all these people together, I would of course like an answer yesterday, especially on these super, super important topics. And I think for me, you would not be a commercial competitor, because I would have to set aside the fact that there is no NDA in place. So I will pay for bespoke research. And in this case, it's so important. and I have to mind shift it to something that everybody else will also know, and that's that's a USP that none of the other agencies have. So I think that is something that I don't see it as a commercial competition. Actually, I see it as something completely different, and something very needed too. And if a competitor sees it as a threat, I think they have to wake up and see.
Interesting. We hadn't thought about it like that, had we?
Yeah.
Are you client side?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's why I say, please put it in one slider with one double click.
Got you. Sorry, which company? Which?
I'm at Philips.
Of course, we met earlier. We did. You're right. Apologies. Thank you.
So actually, I'm not so from market research, and also I don't have the exact or direct answer for the questions. But in the time that I listen to you, it's realized me I'm coming from software development. It sounds to me like open source software development project, and also like the concern that she mentioned it, like also the same also today. Like if you looked, all we are using now the tech. And all the tech stuff that we are using is open source, and most of them is actually the developer hasn't earned money for that. But this, all the stuff that they develop that bring another world, also another possibility, also the people that worked in the tech industry. Therefore, I would say that this rules or this seems really so same like how it will work these communities. I think it would be really helpful to look these communities because they are working, like they are really working really good. How the elevator pitches, the white papers, how the community react, how the hierarchy or not democracy in this group so defined, because the rules, goods, and this subject is defined also, or the community can define these rules, or good, bad, commercial, not commercial. Everything depends on community, and community should come together and aim something, then can also define and also vote the projects. For example, if I want to make a project, I should probably write some white paper or some proposal, and community should say, okay, here it's no-go commercial competition, or no-go is not common good. And if I say no or yes, it should be some answer, not only just yes or no. I think that there is some version that works in other areas and also works also for like our Android devices. It's open source. It's nobody that's paid for developing that thing in the beginning. And that could be also the same for the research, that could be bring research somewhere else. Of course, I'm saying that from software developer perspective. Yes. Like I'm not in market research, maybe I'm really fresh and don't see the gaps in it.
It's a really nice parallel, a really nice example. Thank you for that.
Hi, I think what you're doing sounds brilliant, so I'm really excited to hear more about it. I just had a thought around the threshold for common good, because, for example, Amy, my colleague next to me, we could have something in common, and so you working on something could be for our common good. But is your threshold for common good something that would affect a whole country, a whole city, the whole world? And actually, maybe if you focus on those smaller communities or pockets of people, they're things that wouldn't meet commercial thresholds or the scale that businesses would go after, but you would really be helping the common good of individuals who might not otherwise be acknowledged in society. I don't know how that translates, but it's more around the ground rules.
Translates really nicely.
Yeah, impact and how things are meaningful. If you have a threshold for that, it might be impactful at scale, but actually even if you make a difference for one person, you're making that one person's life so much better. So I think it's important that you remain focused on the fact that good can be conducted at a really small drop in the ocean level as well.
This is really important because we're kind of at the mercy of clients who want to propose projects. We don't know if these projects will, just like Kickstarter, we don't know if they'll be successful or not, we don't know if they'll go live or not, but we certainly need to guide them. And that's fantastic advice to help them really think about what they're trying to achieve as an output. Thank you for that.
Hi. I was also thinking about something to do with kind of internal culture, and you mentioned balance earlier, and I think, you know, when I did some kind of pro bono work during COVID, I remember thinking that balance was kind of tipped a little bit. You mentioned you also had like kind of commercial projects, and how you think of your pro bono work, you know, is it as important as the project that makes the money? And often I think, yeah, a colleague that I know of has been working on a kind of internal inclusivity, diversity policy for his company that's run largely by white middle class men who basically don't think they have time to kind of work on this. Like, they don't have he doesn't have buy-in from them. He can't get it because they have more important things to do. And I wondered how, you know, the people working on this project or taking part, do they treat it as important as their commercial work? And on the flip side, are they like just adding it on? You know, their workload's already 100% on commercial work, and this is now 120%. So I guess, yeah, well-being and balance, basically.
I think one of the issues that we're going to have is if it costs, which it won't, by the way, but if it costs me nothing to join and submit a proposal and then get a project off the ground with 2,000 people, what if I get bored of it and just, you know, slide off it after a while? So we need to also think about things that will lock people in, commit them to the end, including things like certification. We want to offer training. So whoever says, I want to take part in this project, we're going to make sure that whoever's submitted it, the project is ready to offer training, certification, etc., etc. So it's kind of like we're thinking about it a little bit as a sort of hybrid university as well, where there'll be a lot of training for people who won't otherwise get that kind of training.
I love that last point, by the way. I think that's a lovely build on it all. I've loved the idea. I haven't got involved. I know people who have contributed and they've enjoyed it throughout. One of the things I was thinking is, you know, in terms of common good, there's a problem with the market research industry / the marketing world / the knowledge economy, in that, you know, we don't represent the country or the market that we purport to serve. And I do wonder whether there's something about common good which is slightly bursting the bubble. So the one thing you need to do is actually be able to look outside of the small bubble of that market research inhabits. I mean, if Peter Topman was here, he'd give you a good description of quite how biased the research agency is in terms of the people who arrive in it. And I do wonder whether, you know, whether you're looking at tech and AI, whether you're looking at diversity inclusion, whether you're looking at sustainability, whether you're looking at any of those kind of base layer foundational kind of insights, whether it's about actually making sure that we are inclusive of all diverse opinions, whether that's class or ethnicity or anything, so that when we come to build our knowledge, so it's almost like a pre-briefing. You can kind of, and my elevator pitch to it is almost like this is the Wikipedia for pre-briefing, because this is how you understand the world of sustainability before you even start to engage in a brief or a project. And that way you're kind of, you're democratizing the knowledge that everybody should have access to, and hopefully in some idealistic world sort of minimizing bias on any project going forward.
I like that a lot. This is all really adding to, I mean, I knew you'd be better than the people next door, to be honest, as soon as I walked in. Thank you for that. How are we doing for time? Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
So when do we start?
Sorry?
When do we start?
Well, we've got a website that you're welcome to go and look around. It's at the moment it's not everyday life, FE at the end, .com. It's going to soon become a .org, because we've shown it to various client sites who've said, you're not a commercial agency, or you're definitely a .org, you're a non-profit. We're setting up the entity now as I speak to you, so we will be an entity with a board around it. And at the moment there's 6 of us. We're spread across every continent except the American one. So we've got a really diverse team of people as well. It's very exciting, and we're really looking forward to. This is really a soft launch. You guys are the first to kind of hear it outside of our little circle and outside of NEL 1.0. But this has been a fantastic session for learning about your perspectives on it. Soon, in answer to your question, very soon.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's not so much. I've got a few questions, but my thought is, how ambitious do you want to be with this? I mean, what's the sort of the big goal here? I mean, I was talking to Ollie just before, and I just read a book, so a bit of a preamble here about getting buy-in around climate change. How do you get people to change their behaviour? And there's basically two groups. There's groups of experts who are the white middle-aged men who work for consulting companies, and there are activists on the other side who the public thinks are mad and chain themselves to fences. So people don't change their behaviour because they can't see a way to do it in a simple way. And I was saying, we sit on an enormous body of collective knowledge about what everyday people will buy into, what they'll believe, what they like, how they can be persuaded to change their values as well as their behaviours. But it also feels like the other side of the coin is we have a client base who should take an interest in this kind of thing because these are their consumers. And they take a sort of bureaucratic interest. They like to say they do CSO on their website and so forth, and 10% of our plastic is recycled once a week or whatever. But it feels very detached from the reality. But there are a whole group of people who are should be interested in this. It's part of our responsibility to make them buy into it and become part of this and become advocates, because ultimately this comes to government, doesn't it? Because they're the ones who talk to the middle-aged men at consultancy companies who are completely detached from the people on the ground whose behaviour has to change. Do we want to take it up to that level and sort of get a buy-in from all these big corporations saying, look, we're doing it, these guys have knowledge that you just don't have, and we're willing to give you some of that knowledge to make a bigger change, make the world a better place? Is that kind of, can we get to that?
Absolutely right. I mean, one of the projects that we are still discussing is food waste. So the government of Singapore wants to reduce food waste to zero in a year or so, actually, in a couple of years. We know that 30% of all food that's produced is thrown away, wasted. It's a massive, massive issue. And that's a huge topic. I mean, and so much work has already been done on it. So one of the challenges that we have is determining the brief. Where are we going to start? Where is this going to end? What's it going to impact? What are the things that need to be impacted? So we're actually creating a little bit of work for ourselves up front. We can't just launch into it. But at the same time, we are not going to instigate these projects. It's up to whoever, the government of Singapore, to come to us and say, this is what we want to explore. How do we go about doing this? And we can work with them and workshop it and come up with ways of and approaches. But we're thinking, when we talk about common good, we're thinking on a massive, massive scale. No question about that. I mean, we managed to pull together 2,000 people in 3 weeks who were ready and willing and even annoyed at the delays of us sending them briefs and templates to work with. So I'm not saying we'll be able to replicate that. The beginning of the lockdown was a very unusual time. People were in a certain mode and space, but I think the time is ripe. I think there's a lot of us now who really feel like we want to give something back. It's time to give something back.
One of the things I'm thinking, this idea that a government will come to us, I feel like a bit passive. I think we need to go to them. I think we need to be activists, not in a kind of change yourself to a railing activist, but in a kind of we have knowledge, we have corporate sort of connections, and we're telling you that these corporations are going to completely buy in, but you have to be willing to enact the change at a policy level. It feels like it needs to be that big a level of change. So when I talk about ambition, sort of like it's not about how much data we can collect. It's about what we do with that data. What are the insights, and how do we sway people who are very stuck in one way of thinking when we know that an alternative way of thinking is absolutely necessary to make significant change?
Absolutely.
I just think activist mentality is the way forward.
That's really nice. The activist mentality.
else you don't make that link. No, but oh, sorry, yeah. Oh, I'm always afraid of that thing. So no, but I think I do understand, and the activists, but if you're just screaming in the desert, nothing happens. So you need to be able to also talk that, put off your activist hat, and think in the voice of the consumer, which is a client stakeholder as well, because else nothing will happen. So I think also to your point, if he doesn't get the effect he wants, maybe he's not using the right tone of voice to get the message across. They're just like consumers. We also change our voice, right, to them.
What's going on in the world of activism? This is based on so I'm completely wrong. What's going on in the world of activism is they're realising it's not about screaming and shouting. It's about sitting down and doing it in a proper way. Hence, getting sort of corporate clients involved is a way of saying, these are sensible people just like you, and even they realise what has to happen. And we can sit down, we can talk through the evidence and data as you would with any other consultancy you come in, but we actually deal with real people on a day-to-day basis. We understand how to change their values. We're not going to nudge them, we're not going to force them to do things they don't want. We want them to change their values so that it's not something they're forced to do, it's something they want to do. And that comes at both the sort of brand level and a governmental level. And we're kind of the middle bit, with the meat in the sandwich, and that we have that kind of data and understanding of people, and we can use it in a really good way, hopefully. If we're not being overly optimistic.
I'm really enjoying the discussion, so I'm going to go again, sorry. I just wanted to add that I think it's worth remembering that it's about getting to better questions, not just getting to answers. And so even though you don't have a brief, actually getting to better questions can be really intentional and purposeful and valuable.
I'm the first one to put my hands up on that and say, finding out what the real questions are we need to be asking is going to be absolutely vital. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and just, sorry, also enjoying the conversation, just a scrappy thought, but when you mentioned food waste, I suddenly realised how much information waste we have as well. So, you could so imagine with this kind of thing as all going off furiously gathering yet more information or conducting yet more research, but, just looking at my own organisation, we've done in the last couple of years about 800 projects. And I know that within the information we gathered on those projects, there's loads of insight we've never even got to yet, and that would be relevant because that wasn't the purpose of the project at hand. And I kind of look across the room and think, how much information waste have we got in the room? And if we could kind of remine that again for insight that was relevant to the questions at hand, we don't need to go and find more information necessarily. We just need to scrutinise the information we have and kind of shake out some fresh insights. So yeah, that was just a scrappy thought. And picking up on this conversation about kind of activism and conviction and changing people's minds and getting them on side, I think it's about remembering that all these people are people too. There's been a persistent theme throughout this day about, it all comes down to sort of what makes humanity tick and kind of being emotive. So it's about finding the right buttons to press emotionally with people we want to convince to change their behaviour. But I also think it's about making things really like small scale and tangible and actionable. I think one of the problems with these big weighty questions is none of us know what the hell to do with any of them. They feel massive. So if you can kind of translate it to, don't worry, it is, food waste is huge, but Mr. Kraft Heinz, here's a couple of really specific things that you could do. I think that's part of the battle as well.
Great. Yes.
I wonder, maybe it's already been said, isn't this corporate social responsibility basically that's been on the topic for 10 years?
I do something very similar with EOM, which is actually completely profit related. So it sounds, the role is, my role right now is to solve problems for profit, but still solve people's problems. And to do that, we need to identify those problems in the first instance. And that's why we do ecosystem mapping. And that's in another job. In this instance, I guess with companies, with corporations, they will identify a problem that needs to be solved, and there won't be any profit out of the other end of it. There will be a lot of PR, a lot of good things that they've done, and they often don't get a huge amount of funding beyond the kind of initial funding that they get to. I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit disparaging, but that's a tough question, actually. I mean, it does kind of definitely overlap with corporate social responsibility, but we need to make sure we distinguish ourselves, we separate the work that we're doing out from that, because I think a lot of the topics that we explore might not be about sustainability, might not be about the usual kind of CSR type topics that are undertaken. Fantastic. Thank you all very much.